On a quiet morning in May 1940, French soldiers stood inside a fortress they believed could never be broken. Within days, that fortress would become one of the greatest illusions in military history. This is the story of the Maginot Line, and why the wall built to stop a war could not stop the war it was built for. To understand this failure, we must go back to the trenches of the First World War. France had lost nearly 1.5 million soldiers between 1914 and 1918. The war had been fought largely on French soil, and entire regions lay in ruins. When peace finally came in 1918, French leaders made a solemn promise to their people. Never again would France suffer an invasion like that. Germany, though defeated, remained a nation of nearly 70 million people, just across the border. French military planners feared a repeat of 1914, when German armies had swept through Belgium and northern France. Their answer was a new kind of defense, a line of fortresses along the eastern frontier. It was named after André Maginot, the French Minister of War who championed the project. Maginot himself was a veteran of Verdun, wounded in that brutal battle. He believed deeply that fixed fortifications could save the next generation of French soldiers. Construction began in 1929 and continued for nearly a decade. The line stretched along the border with Germany, from Switzerland to Luxembourg. It included underground bunkers, artillery forts, railways, and even air-conditioned barracks. Some forts held living quarters, hospitals, and kitchens far beneath the earth. Soldiers could live inside for weeks without ever seeing daylight. The engineering was, by any measure, remarkable for its time. French newspapers and newsreels proudly showed off this modern marvel to the public. It gave the French people a powerful sense of safety. Many believed Germany would never dare attack such an impenetrable wall. But here is the detail few people noticed at the time. The Maginot Line did not cover the entire French border. It stopped where the Ardennes Forest began, near Belgium. French commanders believed the forest was too dense for tanks to pass through. General Philippe Pétain, a hero of Verdun, once called the Ardennes impenetrable. This single assumption would later prove to be a fatal miscalculation. Belgium, meanwhile, was a neutral country and did not want French fortifications built along its border. This left a dangerous gap in France's defensive plan. French strategists assumed that if Germany attacked, it would come through Belgium, just as it had in 1914. Their plan, known as Plan D, would send French and British forces into Belgium to meet the Germans there. It seemed logical, based on the lessons of the last war. But it also meant French forces were preparing to fight the previous war, not the next one. On the other side of the border, Germany was developing an entirely new philosophy of warfare. After years of restrictions under the Treaty of Versailles, the German military had rebuilt in secret. Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933, promising to restore German strength. German generals studied new tactics that combined fast tanks, aircraft, and radio communication. This approach would later be called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Its goal was not to attack strong points, but to find weaknesses and strike through them quickly. A German officer named Erich von Manstein proposed a bold and risky plan. Instead of repeating the route through Belgium that everyone expected, Germany would attack through the Ardennes Forest. Many senior German generals doubted this plan at first, calling it too dangerous. Hitler, however, was drawn to its boldness and approved it. This decision would change the course of the war within days. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its invasion of Western Europe. German forces first moved into the Netherlands and Belgium exactly as the French had expected. French and British troops rushed north into Belgium, following their prepared plan. It appeared for a moment that the French strategy was working perfectly, but this movement was only a distraction. While the world watched Belgium, the real German attack was quietly forming in the Ardennes. Thousands of German tanks and vehicles moved through narrow forest roads, creating massive traffic jams that were never fully attacked from the air. French reconnaissance planes did spot some of this movement, but the warnings were not taken seriously enough in time. By May 13th, German forces reached the Meuse River near Sedan. This area was lightly defended, since it was considered unlikely to be attacked. German engineers built pontoon bridges under fire, while Stuka dive bombers struck French positions. The French defenders at Sedan, many of them reserve troops with limited training, began to fall back. Panic spread quickly through the ranks, faster than the actual fighting itself. Within 3 days, German tanks had broken completely through the French lines. This is one of the most important truths of the whole campaign. The Maginot Line itself was never actually attacked in force. The fort stood strong, fully armed, fully staffed, waiting for an enemy that never came to them directly. Instead, the Germans simply went around it, through the forest the French believed was impassable. Historians still debate exactly how much blame belongs to the Ardennes Gap versus deeper problems in French military leadership. Some argue the real failure was not the wall itself, but slow decision-making and poor communication among French commanders. Others argue the entire concept of static defense was already outdated in an age of fast-moving mechanized warfare. Both views likely hold some truth. Once the Germans crossed the Meuse, their tanks raced west across France, cutting off Allied armies in Belgium from the rest of the country. General Heinz Guderian, commanding German tank forces, moved so quickly that even his own high command grew nervous. By May 20th, German forces reached the English Channel, trapping hundreds of thousands of Allied troops. This encirclement led directly to the famous evacuation at Dunkirk. Nearly 340,000 British and French soldiers were evacuated by sea between late May and early June. It was a rescue, but it was also a clear sign that the battle for France was already slipping away. Meanwhile, the soldiers stationed inside the Maginot Line waited in their bunkers. Many of them never fired a shot during the entire campaign. Some fortress garrisons held their positions even after Paris fell, following orders to the very end. Paris was declared an open city and occupied by German forces on June 14, 1940. France formally surrendered on June 22, just 6 weeks after the invasion began. The speed of the collapse shocked the entire world, including Germany's own leaders. So why did the Maginot Line fail? It was not because the fortresses themselves were weak. In fact, they performed exactly as designed. The failure was one of imagination, strategy, and assumption. French leaders built a wall based on the lessons of the last war, while their enemy prepared for the next one. The line protected a border, but war does not always come where you expect it. Military planning had focused on where the enemy should attack, rather than fully preparing for where the enemy could attack. The gap at the Ardennes was not a secret. Some officers had actually warned about it before the war. Yet those warnings were not enough to change deeply held assumptions at the top levels of command. There is also a broader lesson here about mindset and flexibility. France had the resources, the fortifications, and many capable soldiers, yet rigid thinking limited their response. Germany, by contrast, embraced speed, surprise, and adaptability as core parts of its strategy. After the war, the term Maginot mentality entered common language. It came to describe any strategy that heavily defends against past threats while ignoring new and different ones. This idea reached far beyond military history, into business, politics, and personal life. The story serves as a reminder that even the strongest defenses can fail if built with the wrong assumptions. Today, sections of the Maginot Line still stand, some preserved as museums that visitors can walk through. Tourists can descend into the same tunnels where French soldiers once waited for a battle that came from an unexpected direction. The fortresses remain, silent and unmoving, much like the fixed strategy that built them. They stand today not as symbols of failure alone, but as symbols of a powerful lesson. Strength is not only about how thick your walls are, but about how well you understand where the real danger might come from. The fall of France in 1940 reshaped the rest of the Second World War, and its consequences still echo through modern military strategy. Nations today study this campaign closely, not to mock the Maginot Line, but to understand how confidence in past solutions can blind us to future threats. History rarely repeats itself exactly, and that is precisely what makes rigid planning so dangerous. The greatest defenses are not just walls of concrete and steel, but minds willing to question their own assumptions. If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more deep dives into the turning points of history. And let us know in the comments what other historical decision do you think changed the course of a war.